There was a time when getting somewhere wasn't the only reason to go. When the journey itself mattered as much as the destination. When you could board a train in the evening, wake up in a different state, and feel like you had truly traveled. If you remember those days, you already know what made them special. If you don't, it's worth understanding what we've lost. The 1970s were the last decade when train travel in America felt like it belonged to another world. Not faster, not more efficient, but something else entirely. And by the end of this, you'll understand why so many people still miss it, even now. Before we measured everything in minutes saved, there was a different set of priorities. Speed was not the point. Comfort was. Connection was. The feeling that you were doing something meaningful, not just efficient. People planned trips differently back then. You did not optimize for the shortest route. You did not book based on price algorithms. You chose based on what felt right. And for long distances, especially overnight journeys, trains felt right in a way nothing else did. There was something reassuring about it. Predictability, the routine. Trains left on schedule. They followed fixed routes. You knew exactly where you would be and when. That certainty created calm. Air travel existed, of course. It was growing, but most families could not afford it yet. And even those who could often chose the train anyway, because flying meant stress, crowds, formality, lines, the anxiety of whether you would make your connection. Trains meant ease. Driving had its appeal, the freedom of the open road, stopping wherever you wanted. But after 8 hours behind the wheel, you arrived exhausted, your back hurt, your eyes were strained. You needed rest before you could even begin your actual trip. Trains let you cover the same distance without lifting a finger. You brought a book. You brought conversation. You brought patience. And the train did the rest. You could work if you wanted. Spread papers across the fold-down tray. Write letters. Read reports. Or you could do nothing at all. Just sit. Watch. Think. Both were perfectly acceptable. Here is what made that possible. Space. Real space. Walk onto a long-distance train in the 70s, and the first thing you noticed was room to breathe. Seats were wide enough to claim as your own. Aisles let you move freely. You could stand, stretch, walk to another car without apologizing to anyone. The design assumed you would be there for hours, so it made room for you to exist. Seats reclined deeply. Not the shallow tilt of an airline seat, but a real recline. Enough to sleep. Enough to feel like you had your own small territory. The upholstery was thick. The armrests were solid. Everything felt built to last. Built for people, not profit margins. The windows were large. Huge by today's standards. You could actually see the world passing by. Not through a tiny porthole, but through glass that framed the landscape like a moving painting. And the light. Natural light flooded the cars during the day. It changed as you moved through different terrain. Morning light across the farmland looked different than afternoon light in the mountains. You noticed these things. You had time to notice. If you could afford it, you took a sleeper car, and that changed everything. A private compartment, a real bed that folded down from the wall, a small sink, a window with a shade you controlled. At night, the porter converted your seating area into a bedroom. In the morning, you woke to the sound of the train moving and daylight streaming through the glass. The porters themselves were part of the experience. They knew the route. They knew the schedule. They could tell you where you were just by looking out the window. They would knock gently to wake you in time for breakfast. They would make sure your stop was announced. There was a professionalism to it, a kind of care that felt personal without being intrusive. There was a ritual to it. Even if you had done it a dozen times, it still felt special. There was something about sleeping while moving and waking up somewhere completely different. It felt like magic, even when you understood exactly how it worked. But here's what most people remember most: the dining car. You didn't grab a snack from a vending machine. You walked 3 or 4 cars down, through the connectors where the floor shifted beneath you and the sound of the wheels grew louder. You opened the door. White tablecloths, real silverware, a printed menu. The menu wasn't fancy, but it was real. Pot roast, fried chicken, meatloaf. The kind of food that took time to prepare. The kind of meal you'd get at a good diner. You sat down, sometimes alone, sometimes with strangers. A waiter came by, poured coffee from a metal pot, took your order on a small pad. 20 minutes later, a hot meal arrived, cooked fresh, served on real plates. The food came from a real kitchen, just a few feet away. You could smell it cooking as you walked past. You could hear the sounds of preparation, pans clanging, orders being called. It was happening right there, in real time. And somehow, that made it taste better. Knowing it wasn't reheated, wasn't prepackaged, wasn't pulled from a freezer an hour before departure. Outside, the landscape rolled past. Farmland, small towns, rivers, forests. You ate while the world moved by, feeling like you were inside something larger than yourself. The timing of meals created structure. Breakfast meant morning. Lunch meant midday. Dinner meant evening was coming. It grounded you in time, even as you moved through space. And here's the part that surprises people now. The dining car made you talk. Maybe it was the shared tables. Maybe it was the time. But conversations happened naturally. You'd sit across from someone you'd never met, exchange a few words about where you were headed, about the weather, about the food. Sometimes that was it, but other times the conversation kept going. You'd learn where they were from, what they did, why they were traveling, and for an hour, maybe 2, you were connected in a way that didn't happen on a plane or in a car. There was no rush to finish, no pressure to leave. You could sit with your coffee and watch the scenery and talk, or not talk. Both were fine. People told stories, shared advice, recommended places to visit, warned you about roads to avoid. It was informal mentoring, casual connection, the kind of interaction that happens when people have time and proximity and nothing else demanding their attention. The observation cars were even better for this. Dome cars, some of them, had curved glass ceilings that let you see the sky. Lounge cars had big windows and swivel chairs. People gathered there to watch the scenery, to read, to talk quietly. Some railroads had full-length dome cars. You could walk the entire length under glass, see the track stretching ahead and behind, watch the landscape unfold in 3 dimensions. The lounges had a different atmosphere than the dining car. More relaxed, more intimate. People brought drinks, played cards, did crossword puzzles together, made friends they would keep in touch with for years. There was no pressure to perform, no agenda. You were all just passengers on the same train, sharing the same hours. That created something rare, a gentle, temporary community. You knew you would never see these people again, and somehow that made it easier to be open, to be yourself, to say things you might not say to people you would see tomorrow. Children walked the aisles, families spread out across multiple seats. Parents did not have to keep kids strapped in. Kids could move, explore, burn energy, visit the lounge car, watch the baggage handler work, feel like they were part of an adventure. Elderly couples sat side by side, holding hands, watching the world go by. They had done this route before, maybe many times, but it still held something for them, a kind of comfort, a ritual they shared. It was not loud. It was not chaotic. It was just life, happening at train speed. But by the 70s, you could already feel things starting to shift. Amtrak had just been formed. The government was stepping in to save passenger rail, but the system was fragile. Airlines were getting cheaper, faster, more accessible. Highways were better than ever. The interstate system was complete. The country was speeding up, and trains, by comparison, were starting to feel slow. Service was being cut. Routes were being eliminated. The equipment was aging. Some cars still had their original paint from the railroads that used to own them. You would see mismatched cars in a single train, different colors, different eras, all patched together. But the core experience was still there. That's what mattered. Here's why that mattered. That slowness was the entire point. The 70s were the last decade when you could still experience long-distance train travel the way it had been designed, with dining cars, with sleeper service, with lounges and porters and care. After that, cuts came. Routes were eliminated. Services shrank. The dining cars started serving pre-packaged meals. The lounges disappeared. The observation domes were retired. What remained was functional, but it wasn't the same. So if you rode the trains in the 70s, you caught the tail end of something. The last moment when the journey still felt like part of the vacation. When people chose trains not because they had to, but because they wanted to. It wasn't nostalgia then. It was just travel. But looking back now, it's clear. That was the peak. People who remember train travel in the 70s don't usually talk about schedules or routes. They talk about how it felt. The quiet, the rhythm, the sense of being carried, of letting go. The quiet and the rhythm stayed with you. There was a psychological comfort to it. You didn't have to navigate. You didn't have to make decisions every few hours. You just got on, found your seat, and let the train do the work. That comfort was rare. That kind of surrender is rare now. We're used to being in control, to checking our phones, to optimizing every minute. But on a train, you couldn't do that. You were just along for the ride. Surrender was part of the gift, and that was liberating. The sound of the wheels on the rails became a kind of meditation. The gentle swaying lulled you into calm. People slept better on trains than they expected to. They arrived feeling rested, not drained. It felt like meditation. The journey didn't exhaust you. It restored you. You left feeling restored. And then there was the dignity of it. Train travel didn't strip you down. You didn't take off your shoes. You didn't stand in line to be scanned. You weren't crammed into a narrow seat with strangers pressing against you on both sides. You kept your space. You kept your composure. You were treated like a person, not a number. You were a person. That mattered then. It still matters now. And people remember, it mattered. We can't go back, of course. The world has moved on. Speed has won. Efficiency has won. We get places faster now. We pack more into our days. Speed changed everything, but something was traded away. Something harder to measure than time. A kind of spaciousness, a kind of grace, a reminder that not everything worth doing has to be done quickly. Spaciousness mattered. The trains of the 1970s weren't perfect. They broke down. They ran late. They weren't always clean. The equipment was old. The infrastructure was crumbling. But they offered something we've mostly lost: the chance to move through the world without rushing through it, to travel with intention, to arrive having experienced the journey, not just endured it. Travel with intention. If you remember those days, you know what that felt like. If you don't, it's hard to explain. But it was real, and it mattered. It was real. Because sometimes, the best way forward is to remember what we left behind. Remember.